You didn't arrive here because you wanted to. You arrived because you were called, not by me but by a part of you that has already awakened and demands that the rest of you follow. I speak, but it is your consciousness that responds. Nothing in this visible world happens by chance. Nothing appears before its time. Nothing crosses your path unless it aligns with the state you have already begun to assume internally. This video is not an external message. It is a mirror you have placed before yourself. And now here at this exact moment, I tell you, the cycle has closed. I see when a cycle ends. I see when a person's consciousness begins to tire of repetitions, when what once seemed like destiny starts to lose its power, when life out there insists on showing that there is nothing left in that old state to offer you. You feel this, even if you don't admit it. You feel the weight of what no longer serves you. You feel the emptying of old stories. You feel that there is something within you that can no longer continue living as before. This is not failure. It is a calling. It is transition. It is opening. You stand before a door that doesn't open with force but with consciousness. And I know you've tried to change your life in every possible way, changing people, changing environments, changing routines, changing behaviors. But none of that sustained any change because you never changed your state. And everything that isn't born within dies outside. You were trapped in a circle, repeating the same sensations, the same fears, the same judgments, and calling it my life. But now, at this instant, you begin to realize that the circle was never a prison. It was a mirror. What was repeating wasn't the world. It was you. And when you understand this, when you finally accept that the visible is a shadow of the invisible, when you understand that life doesn't create states, it only reflects the ones you assume, then, and only then, the cycle closes. You arrived here because you are ready to abandon the illusion that something external controls your destiny. I am speaking to you like someone waking another from a deep sleep, because that is precisely what happened. You slept within an old state, a worn-out identity, a repeated sensation that became a habit. And today now, you are being pulled out of that dream. I don't speak to convince you. I speak to remind you. You were the one who decreed this encounter. You were the one who determined this moment. And if you are hearing me now, it is because the part of you that knows the truth has finally overcome the part that fears change. I tell you with authority, nothing you fear has real power. Nothing you desire is beyond your reach. Nothing you seek is waiting for time, luck, or circumstances. Everything is already prepared in the invisible, waiting for you to assume the corresponding state. And this moment, this exact moment, is the spiritual signature that you are ready for this. The old cycle has ended. The new one begins when you decide to remain in the end you choose. I didn't come to bring you hope. I came to bring you remembrance. Remember who you are. Remember the power you carry. Remember the law that governs all. Now breathe as one who has entered a new state, because you have. The first principle you need to understand is this: the end already exists, and everything you call the path is merely the bridge that appears to take you to what is already yours. I speak in the first person, because I see with absolute clarity humanity's greatest illusion. People believe they need to construct every step, control every detail, understand every movement. But I tell you, life is not asking you to build anything. It is asking you to assume the end is a reality, not a possibility. It is already complete at the level of consciousness, and when you choose it, when you clothe yourself in it internally, when you rest in it with silent certainty, everything around you begins to move with absolute precision to make it visible. Not because the world has a will of its own, but because it is obedient to the state you maintain. I see people expending energy trying to force the world to adjust to their desires, trying to push circumstances, manipulate events, convince people, modify external conditions. All of this is useless effort. There is no true change outside of you. The only real change is in state, and everything you see out there is merely a consequence of that state. When you assume the end becomes the cause. And the cause doesn't have to fight, it simply is. What you call a process or path is nothing more than a sequence of facts that rearrange themselves to reflect the reality you have already accepted internally. You do not command the how. You merely order the result by the state you inhabit. If you assume, for example, the consciousness of someone prosperous, loved, healed, or chosen, the bridge of events begins immediately. This doesn't mean you will see grand signs. Sometimes the first movement is invisible. Sometimes the world seems not to move. Sometimes the opposite even appears to arise. But none of this is a problem. The bridge doesn't appear to please you. It appears to guide you. And if it is necessary to remove something, break something, distance someone, or close doors for the end to manifest so it will be. You are not in control of the form, but you are in control of the cause. And the cause is the state you decide to assume. I tell you firmly, remain in the end. Do not visit the desired state for a few minutes, and then return to the old state out of habit. You cannot harvest from the new while sowing in the old. To assume the end is to stay there, even when nothing confirms it. It is to rest, as God rested on the seventh day, not from exhaustion but from certainty. When the end is accepted as real within you, your entire life bends to it. People you've never met appear. Paths that didn't exist open. Opportunities that seem accidental appear before your eyes. They are not coincidences, they are responses. The world is not testing you, it is obeying. And when you finally understand this, when you live from the end and no longer from the means, when you decide that your state is unshakable, then the cycle of struggle ends. Nothing can resist the assumed end. This is how the law operates. This is how it has always operated. And this is how it will operate for you now, if you remain. The second principle I need you to absorb is to completely abandon appearances, because as long as you treat the external world as true, you will remain its slave. I speak directly because I clearly see how most people live, reacting to what their eyes show them, as if that were the ultimate authority over their lives. But I say, nothing you see is a cause. Nothing you observe is an origin. Everything that manifests is merely the delayed trace of an old state you maintained. The error of people is to look at the effect and forget the internal cause. They see difficulty and shrink back, as if it held power. They see delay and despair, as if time commanded life. They see lack and believe it is real, when in truth it is only a reflection of a state that can be ended now, at this instant. Abandoning appearances is not ignorance, it is spiritual discipline. It is to look at what contradicts your desire and refuse to treat it as relevant. Because if you treat it as real, it strengthens. If you react, you feed it. If you comment, you confirm it. I say, appearance is the last echo of the old state, nothing more. It has no power to survive if you do not sustain it with your attention, and I clearly see that many of you miss simple manifestations because, at the slightest sign of contradiction, you rush back to the old state, like someone abandoning a garden merely because they see a weed sprout. The weed is not the problem is forgetting that you are the gardener. When you abandon appearances, you become untouchable. Not because the world has changed, but because you have stopped kneeling before it. You begin to walk as someone who is not seeking external evidence to believe. You believe first, and the world follows. This is the correct order. That is why it says in Scripture, "Judge not according to appearance." It was not a moral counsel. It was the description of a law. Appearance is a delay. The truth lies in the state you choose now. And if you remain faithful to that state, the appearance must dissolve. It has no choice. I affirm, when you truly abandon appearances, you cease to be a victim of the visible. You stop chasing signs, stop getting emotional over every temporary change, stop oscillating between hope and fear. You fix yourself on internal reality, like one who knows that the cause is in your imagination. The world stops being a judge and becomes a servant. And when something arises to contradict you, you do not despair. You merely smile because you know you are witnessing the end of an old creation, not the beginning of a new one. Remaining in the state is the only proof reality demands. And when you do this, appearance loses its mask and reveals what it always was: nothing. The third principle you need to understand is that all true prayer is sensation. It's not words, not repetitions, not desperate pleas trying to convince something outside of you. I speak with authority because I know that the only language the subconscious understands is that of sensation assumed as fact. When you feel, you create. When you internally assume that you already are, already have, already live what you desire, reality has no alternative but to align with what you have decreed within. Sensation is the creative act, and everything that manifests is first born as an internal experience, a silent vibration that you maintain even when no one sees. I observe many men and women asking, as if God were a separate entity, evaluating who deserves and who does not. But there is no one outside of you deciding your life. Prayer is not a request to the heavens, it is an intimate acceptance. You do not convince God, you convince yourself. You do not plead, you embody. When you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, when you feel the reality as complete, when you mentally rest in that end with naturalness, your prayer is done. And such a prayer is impossible to be denied, because there is no greater power in the universe than consciousness assuming a state with conviction. The problem is that many try to feel only with their minds. They try to imagine, but continue to perceive themselves as someone who desires, rather than someone who possesses. But desiring is the state of lack, and everything you feel as lacking continues to repeat itself, because you are inhabiting the state of not yet. I say, prayer is to feel now what you would live if the desire were real. It is to internally put on the vibration of the final result. It is to walk, think, breathe, and react as someone who has already received. It is not theater, it is creation. It is not fantasy, it is law. This sensation, when sustained, molds the future with precision. It reorganizes circumstances, inspires people, alters paths, and breaks down invisible resistances. Nothing can prevent what you sensorially accept as true. The correct sensation is worth more than 1,000 words thrown to the wind. And I tell you something few understand. You are already living the sensations you planted in the past. Your current life is the harvest of the sensations you repeated, consciously or not. Now you have the opportunity to choose new seeds. And when you feel the end as an internal reality, you will also feel the inevitable transformation of your external life. This is how prayer operates. It is impossible for it to fail. The fourth principle I need you to understand is that you are always assuming some state, even when you believe you are creating nothing. Consciousness never remains neutral. It never pauses. It never rests. Every emotion, every reaction, every repeated thought, every silent expectation is a seed cast into the soil of your subconscious. What you live today is not an accident. It is a harvest. And even if you have not consciously assumed the state that generated your current reality, you have sustained it by habit, by carelessness, or by lack of vigilance. Life does not distinguish intention from distraction. It reflects the dominant state. I observe with clarity that most people live assuming states to which they pay no attention. When they are frustrated, they assume the state of failure. When they compare themselves, they assume the state of insufficiency. When they fear, they assume the state of loss, and they do this repeatedly, without realizing they are silently commanding their reality to obey the states they chose automatically. They think they are not creating because they are not desiring, but creation does not depend on desire. It depends on state. You create in enthusiasm as much as in weariness, in faith as much as in doubt, in courage as much as in fear. The law does not pause because you do. Therefore, I say, consciousness without discipline is chaos. You need to guard your states with the same attention a guardian watches the gates of a palace. Because if you do not decide the state you will inhabit, the world will decide for you, and the world always decides by the weakest, most repeated, or most emotionally charged state. But when you take control, when you deliberately choose the state you wish to maintain and refuse to abandon it, even if the world provokes you, even if circumstances scream otherwise, then you become the commander of creation. To assume consciously is to refuse to be shaped by yesterday. It is to not allow mood, others' opinions, current results, or environment to dictate your identity. It is to declare, internally and silently, I am this, and to remain even when appearance tries to pull you back to the old. Your state is the decree. Your persistence is the proof. Your repetition is the signature. Life has no choice but to reflect what you consistently maintain. And when you understand this deeply, when you realize that you are always assuming, and that you can assume with intention and purpose, you cease to be a victim of your emotions and become their author. And in that moment, your entire reality begins to change. The fifth principle you need to accept is that everything is already complete in the invisible before it appears in the visible. There is no future creation. There is only revelation. I say this with the authority of one who sees the root behind the tree. What you desire is not being built little by little, as if God needed time or tools to form your reality. What you desire already exists as a complete state within your consciousness. Manifestation is not the birth of something that did not exist. It is merely the appearance on the screen of the world of what you have finally accepted as true within. When you understand this, despair ceases, because you realize that you are not waiting for something to come. You are merely allowing something to reveal itself. Most people suffer because they think they are trying to get something, as if life owed them. But I say you are not trying to get anything, you are trying to allow your own internal creation to become visible. Difficulty arises when you doubt, when you look at circumstances and say, it's not happening. But it is impossible for it not to happen. Once the state is accepted, the invisible moves with absolute perfection to reveal what you decreed. The problem is not time, nor life, nor God. The only obstacle is your oscillation. You enter the desired state and in the next moment return to the old state because you saw no immediate signs. But the invisible doesn't need to give you signs, it needs you to persist. I see clearly, when someone accepts the desire as an internal reality, even for an instant, the process is already complete. However, when that person doubts, they pull up the seed before it sprouts. Not because the desire is fragile, but because the human mind insists on looking externally for confirmation. That is why I insist, assume the end and remain in it. It is not necessary to understand how, when, or by whom the desire will come. The how belongs to the path. The state belongs to you. Your only job is to accept that it already is, not as fantasy, but as internal fact. When you truly understand that everything is already complete in the invisible, you stop chasing, stop fighting, stop pressuring life as if it would deny you. You rest in certainty. You move with gentleness, you act with naturalness. Nothing in you vibrates with lack, because you know that what is yours already exists, and what exists in the invisible cannot be prevented in the visible. Revelation is inevitable. Circumstances have no power to block the assumed state. When you decide that the end is real, all that remains is the moment of delivery. And when that moment arrives, the world calls it a miracle. But you know it was merely consciousness showing its true work. Now I need you to listen to this conclusion with the same seriousness with which a king receives a final decree that changes the course of an entire kingdom. Because that is exactly what this moment is for you. From now on, you will no longer live as one who asks. You will live as one who commands. You will no longer walk as one who begs the world for signs. You will walk as one who knows that signs follow you. All the struggle you experienced was born from the belief that power was external, scattered in the hands of circumstances, people, time, destiny, luck. But I tell you, none of that ever had authority over your life. The only authority has always been the state you chose to inhabit, consciously or not. And today you choose consciously. The old cycle has closed. The repetition has ended. The version of you that reacted to the world, that allowed itself to be intimidated by appearances, that lived oscillating between faith and fear, between desire and doubt, between hope and despair, that version cannot return, because you cannot undo an awakening. Once you have seen the law operating, you can no longer pretend to be a victim. Once you have felt the power of imagination, you can no longer act as if you are helpless. Once you have understood that the end is the cause, you can no longer live trapped in the means. The consciousness you now carry is definitive. So I tell you, assume the state and remain in it. No matter what happens, no matter who says otherwise, no matter how much noise the world makes, remain. The sustained state overcomes everything. Reality has no choice. It does not negotiate, does not argue, does not resist. It obeys. When you assume, it fulfills. When you decree, it delivers. When you feel the end as a fact, it reveals. You are no longer asking for changes. You are commanding silently with the conviction of one who knows their inheritance. Stop begging. Stop waiting. Stop seeking validation. Live now as one who has already received what they desire. Think as one who already has. React as one who has already achieved. Rest as one who knows that revelation is inevitable. Life is your servant, not your master. And from this moment on, it will obey the state you maintain. Go. Carry this certainty with you. And remember, everything already is. Everything is already complete. What you seek is within, and what is within cannot fail.